You asked for it, and now here it is. You want to have a home birth, but your husband just isn't for it. This problem is so common, and sometimes it's hard to understand because men and women just think so very differently. But today, I'm going to start the process of trying to help you both get unified so you can move forward on the same page. Let's go. Are you a Christian woman yearning for a beautiful, joyful pregnancy and birth with a focus on God, not medical tests? Are you worried the birth you want isn't possible and you're tired of being treated like an accident waiting to happen? Hey mama, I'm Lori, host of Your Birth God's Way. I'm a certified nurse-midwife now, but I wasn't always. After working for nearly 20 years in the broken maternity system, I too was in your shoes wondering how I could have the birth I wanted and that I felt God meant for me to have. I found a secret that has actually been known since the beginning of time. God's way is the best way. Spoiler alert, God made us and our babies, and He knows us best. He designed us perfectly for pregnancy, birth, and nourishing our babies after birth, if we work with His design and not against it. In this podcast, you'll learn how to be healthy and have joy during this time of life that will be over before you know it. So if you're ready to reclaim your birth and your babies for His glory, go turn on a few episodes of Bluey for that little one on your hip so you can put the focus back on you for a few minutes with me. Review time is so cool today because this review, assuming the location is correct, is coming all the way from Norway. I'm so excited about this one. This review is from Amanda. She says, or the headline says, True Christian Pregnancy Podcast. I can now say that I have listened to every episode of Lori's podcast and have learned something from each and every one. You will not regret listening to this if you are a Christian woman of childbearing age. Lori shares her knowledge and wisdom abundantly in the most loving way. She wants to help you get closer to God through your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. She shares the biblical way of becoming a mother and her personal medical knowledge to help you make the best decisions for you and your baby. Thank you so much, Amanda. So cool that somebody from Norway is listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for your encouragement. If you have not left me a review yet, please hit pause real quick. Just go leave me a review. Doesn't take you long, but it makes a big difference for me, and it helps me reach lots of other moms like you so that this message can get out to as many people as possible, because there are people out there who need to know that there is actual, real childbirth information out there from a Christian perspective. Not new agey, not weird, wacko out there stuff, but actual faith-based, also evidence-based childbirth, pregnancy, postpartum, breastfeeding knowledge available. And just like it's helped so many of you, we want to make sure we're helping as many moms as we can. So if you'll just take a quick 30 seconds, leave me a review, makes a big difference. Thank you so much. We're going to start this episode today with scripture. I want you to turn in your Bibles if you have it anywhere near you. You got an app on your phone, something. Turn to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to read verses 20 through 24. So Adam gave names to all cattle, to the birds of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper comparable to him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now, you know as well as I do, our culture does not like to talk about what I'm going to say to start off here. But our purpose here on this podcast is to please God, not man. Ladies, listen to me. We as women came from man. God literally put Adam to sleep and took one of his ribs and fashioned us from him. Now, clearly that doesn't happen to every man anymore. It happened to one man. But from that one man, from that one action that God did, every woman has come. And even today, A piece of a man is required for every female that exists. But that being said, men and women are very different. Even though woman was made for man, we still are very, very different. We think very differently. And because of this, it is very hard for us to understand each other and to understand the thoughts and the motives and the driving force behind the opposite sex. This is the root behind essentially every argument and misunderstanding that exists in families who have differences in opinion about where and how birth should take place. I want to start this episode by addressing the moms. And then I'm going to talk to the dads. And I want to also preface this by saying you're going to want to stay tuned to the end because I've got some exciting news I want to share with you on this exact topic. I worked on putting together ideas and jotting down different things to cover. And before I knew it, I about had a book written, and I'm only half joking. There is so much to cover here, and there is no way that I can get it all in a podcast format. So just be sure you're staying to the end because there's going to be something that you're going to want to know about. So just a little bug in your ear for that. So first, mama. I'm a woman like you. I get frustrated with my husband for not understanding me, not seeing my point of view, all the things just like you do. I feel like I make myself clear and somehow he just doesn't get it. But what I have to do is I have to take a step back and realize that I'm often speaking in a language that he just can't possibly understand. It's not because he's weak. It's not because there's something wrong with him. It's because he's different. Women tend to be emotionally driven, but that drive gives us a fierce instinct to love and protect in a way that a man can't fully get. But he does get protection. That's how God made him, to protect us and to protect what is his. It's just that how he sees protection is different from how we see protection. Many of you found me on this podcast because you were searching for information about birth and how to walk through this process that has been painted as scary and awful by the world. You knew that couldn't possibly be the full story, and that instinct drove you to search, and now here you are. You've probably read 1,000 articles and listened to 1,000 podcasts, and you probably follow 1,000 accounts about birth. So you are learning, and it all makes sense to you because you are being spoken to by other females who think like you do. But men don't necessarily do that the same as we do. They are much more logically driven. And as our providers, they are not as often given to reading articles and listening to podcasts. They're usually also not as verbal as we are. So those types of things, they don't really appeal to them the same way they appeal to us, assuming they even have the time or availability to consume content in that way. What they do know is that in general, technology has made their lives easier, whether that technology be the computers needed for their white-collar job or the tools that have been invented and implemented for their blue-collar job. Either way, the bells and whistles have made a lot of things better for them. So why would they not assume that it is the same for their bride giving birth to their baby? Think about that. It seems at face value that a hospital has all the technology that makes birth better and safer. They've probably strolled through a cemetery at some point in their life and thought about all those tiny little headstones and probably thought to themselves, man, I am so glad we have hospitals so those things don't happen anymore. They know they were probably born in a hospital and they're doing just fine now. They don't have problems, right? They know that most babies are born at hospitals, and they may have never heard any negative stories at all. Some of the stories like that you've heard and that you were terrified of experiencing the same way, they haven't heard those stories because, again, men are not as verbal as we are, and they're not as social as we are. And their circles are often smaller, and guys just don't talk about this stuff unless something big happens. They can't stand the idea, Mama, listen to this. They can't stand the idea of you being in pain. They are fixers. Men by nature are fixers. They want to fix things. They want to make sure that you are able to access pain relief when you need it because they don't want you to suffer. When they see you suffering and they know there's nothing they can do to make that suffering go away, they want to at least put you in a position to where you can have pain relief. Now, I don't want you to take from that birth is suffering. It's not. But that's how they often will see it because all they've probably seen is TV and the movies, right? Guys don't go to other people's births. They haven't seen it any other way besides people screaming in a bed. So of course they don't want you to be in that position. They want you to be somewhere where you can access the good stuff as they see it. It's going to make you feel better. Back to them being our protectors. Why wouldn't they assume that we're going to give birth at a hospital? Given all that I just said, of course they're going to assume we're going to give birth at a hospital. Why wouldn't they assume that a hospital is the safest place? Why wouldn't they push back when you break the news to them that you don't want to go to a hospital to give birth? Why wouldn't they recoil and think you've lost it? That's only natural at first. But just because we're different doesn't mean we can't seek to understand the other one. And now that I've taken a few minutes to help you, Mom, understand where your husband is coming from, I want to shift my focus and talk to you, Dad. I hope that through what I've said so far, you know that at least on some level, I get where you're coming from. And I want to acknowledge that it is real and it is legitimate. And if all you know is what the world has shown you, it certainly makes sense to think the way that you do. But I also ask that you bear with me and consider that you may not have been given full information. And I want to help you to see the other side of birth so you can be a fully informed father and man of God who makes his decisions based on all the information, not just some of it. I know that you want your wife by your side. I know that the thought of something happening to her terrifies you, but you can't say that out loud. I know the thought of something happening to your baby terrifies you, but you can't say that out loud either. I know birth is a bit terrifying to men. You may have never listened to my podcast before, but I am so thankful that you're here now. I want you to know that a big goal of mine in this podcast overall is to remove fear, because God tells us repeatedly in Scripture to not fear and to trust Him. I'm going to ask you, Dad, to consider several things in the coming moments. And these may not be totally new to you, or maybe they are, but I want you to marinate on them and consider them. If you're not familiar with me, I want you to know that I used to be 100% medical. I was a labor and delivery nurse in hospitals, and all I knew was the way that things are done there. And I thought those things were right. I thought they must be the best way, otherwise we wouldn't be doing them. I thought people with birth plans trying to labor naturally were crazy and reckless. But over the course of my 20 plus years in the maternity world, I completely changed. I have learned so much. And as a result of all the things that I learned, I'm completely on the other end of the spectrum now. My perspective on birth and the safety of that God-designed process it's all completely changed. I went from thinking that the hospital was the only place to have a baby to driving 5 hours from my home to have my first baby just to keep from crossing the threshold of a hospital. For somebody like me who was so medical to make that kind of a drastic decision, something big must have changed my opinion. Knowing everything I had seen that was possible, all the bad things, after even working in a NICU, neonatal ICU, and seeing babies who had paid the price for those bad things, I still got in a car and made that drive because my perspective on what was the safest changed that drastically. So give me a little bit more time and walk with me through these things I want to share with you to help you see why your wife is wanting to do things differently than you may have expected. First thing I want to talk about is for you to remember that God created birth. God made birth. I know you know this, but you may not know how much the world's view of birth does not believe this at all, and how much doctors have co-opted this whole process to try to control it. They don't trust birth. They think women need help to do it all. Everything sometimes from even conceiving, up to starting labor, to managing pain, to actually even giving birth, to giving formula to babies after birth because women might not make enough milk. The whole process that has taken place all by itself for thousands of years is now managed by the medical system. They don't really truly believe that it will ever happen as it should if they don't do something about it. They don't trust God, and they certainly don't trust His design for birth. That's the first thing that I need you to understand underlying everything else. Second, technology is not always good. Normal protocol when you're admitted to the hospital labor and delivery ward is IVs and monitors and instruments and so on. And again, back to what I said before, you may think that these things all make things safer, that they're good. But I want you to think a little bit deeper about them. First, IVs. The purpose and the reality of why they use IVs on every single mom that walks on a labor and delivery floor. And let me preface this by saying there are times that everything I'm going to talk about are actually needed. But the amount of times that these things are actually needed is very, very small. And when they are applied to all moms, they cause problems. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But IV purpose and IV reality is that IVs are put in mom's arms to hydrate them because women are not allowed to eat or drink at all during labor. When they're doing the hardest work they will ever do in their lives, they are denied nutrition and hydration by mouth. And this is based on outdated thought that isn't really based on fact at all. It's based on the fear of aspiration, which means getting water or food into your lungs if the mom undergoes general anesthesia. General anesthesia almost never happens even in a hospital setting. And so we are basing this denial of calories and nutrition and hydration to every single mom for something that almost never happens, even in the worst cases. Very rarely is general anesthesia actually needed. And yet, every single mom is subjected to it. The reality of IVs is that it makes it real easy to give Pitocin. That same Pitocin they have every intention of giving your wife, which is a medication to either get her labor started or keep her labor going or speed her labor up when it's not going fast enough for them. Even if she doesn't want it, believe that they're going to try to get her to take it. If the IV is already there, it's easier to talk her into it, and it's easier to use it after birth without her ever even knowing it. 2 brief points on the realities of these IVs that are in the arms. Now, they will sell it to you as being safer for her. It's already there just in case they need to do this or that or the other. And that holds some truth. But it's not the full picture, because you don't see how much the things that they're worried about just in case actually are caused by them. But that's a whole different topic that I don't have time to get into today. Let's talk about monitors. Let's talk about the purpose and the reality of those monitors that get strapped on to the bellies of every single mom that gets admitted to a hospital. Electronic fetal monitors were implemented into labor and delivery units 50 or 60 years ago, I guess it's been, with literally no evidence that they help improve outcomes at all. There's never been evidence that they actually help. Even with not having any evidence, they are still put on every single mom. And there is one thing that they have shown that they do, and that is they increase the C-section rate. The C-section rate is through the roof and is almost entirely secondary to using monitors on every single mom. They are an excellent tool for doctors because they can make sure that they take that baby out by C-section at the very first blip, which for their liability purposes almost completely covers their tail. It also allows them to monitor a labor remotely. They don't even have to be in the building. Please believe that the monitor that's on your wife's belly when she is admitted to a labor and delivery floor is more about the staff than it is about you. It's more about the hospital liability and the doctor liability than it is about the safety of your baby. On top of all that, those monitors limit motility. Mom can't get up and walk around. They expose the baby to radiation for the duration of labor. They cause anxiety. They lead to other unnecessary interventions, and they cause everyone to become fixated on a screen, hardly even looking at your wife. That's the reality of that piece of technology. Quickly, let's look at the reality of the instruments, all the stuff that's available. That surgical pack that gets opened at every birth. It's full of metal instruments used for this or that, up to and including cutting your wife's vagina to make more room for the baby to speed up delivery and to make repair easier for the doctor afterwards. It makes it easy to take your wife's placenta and do with it as they choose. It makes it easy for them to take your baby's precious stem cells and do with them as they choose. They never tell you this, but it happens. These instruments make it easier to overcharge you for instruments that might not even be used, all of which in most hospitals these days are actually just thrown in the trash. They're not even sterilized and reused anymore. They're just thrown away, and you get charged for them. All that technology has a place, and it can truly save lives, but all these instruments also have some side effects. If the technology truly saves a life, then the risk of the side effects is worth it. But when the technology is applied to women who don't need it, then it can cause problems for them that they would have never had without that technology, those interventions. And the risk isn't worth it for them because it was a risk incurred for no reason since the technology wasn't needed. Let me give you an example, maybe in guy terms. I tried really hard to think of something that would parallel this to help you get what I'm trying to say here, but let me give you an example of a Slim Jim. Remember those, the things that you would use to unlock a car door when you closed your keys in the car? You know, when you use those things, you risked damaging something on the inside of your car door. Maybe I'm dating myself because I don't know if these things are even around anymore, but a lot of you guys will at least know what I'm talking about. You know, if you've locked your keys in your car, a Slim Jim is a tool that you can use, or you used to be able to use, like I said, to get that door to unlock. If it works, it saves you from having to break a window or spend a lot of money on a service to like come unlock your door and do all that stuff. But you only use this tool in very specific situations because the risk of the damage that you would do to the inside of the door, if you're just doing it for no reason. If you're doing it to unlock the door, it's worth the risk to keep from having to do those other things, but otherwise it's just not worth the risk. right? You wouldn't just go around willy-nilly using that and jamming it in a door for every single door that wasn't locked shut with the keys on the inside, because that wouldn't make any sense. It wasn't needed then. It's not worth the risk. The same goes for labor. The same goes for birth. Nearly all women have the keys, and they don't need interventions applied to them because their keys are not locked inside the car. Their keys are in their hand. They don't need any help. But if they do lock the keys in the car, if they do have the things that need the interventions, then you can start to really truly weigh the risk and benefits, because then we're looking at things where you might be preventing things that you don't want to happen. And so then the risk is worth it. But those things, again, happen to very, very few women when they are left alone to labor naturally as God designed them to do. Let me shift gears a little bit and help you understand something else about labor. Labor does not work well when interrupted. Are you a hunter? Or have you ever been walking through the woods or out in nature and maybe come upon an animal that was in labor, was having a baby? I know that doesn't happen often. If not that, have you ever had a cat or a dog who had babies? You know that if you've ever walked up on an animal who is in labor or giving birth, she doesn't just sit there and stop and say hi to you, right? She's usually going to get up and take off. And what you may not know is that animals are able to shut off their labor for days at a time if they sense danger. So when you walk up on them as a stranger, they take off and they may not go back into labor for a day or two because they do not perceive that it is safe to give birth. It is something that God built into them to protect their offspring. Guess what? It's the same for women. Have you ever known of a woman to go into a hospital thinking she's in labor only to have everything stop when she gets there? That wasn't a fluke. It happens all the time. This woman is having natural reactions that God put there. Her subconscious is doing exactly what God put it there to do. It is telling her that this is not safe. This place is not safe. I don't know who these people are. I don't know where I am. I don't know what all this stuff is. This place is bright. There's strangers everywhere. Everything is unfamiliar. Her body simply cannot labor naturally there. And yet when she goes in thinking she's in labor and then gets sent home, she's made to feel like she doesn't know her own body, like she doesn't know what's going on. And yet her body was doing what it was designed to do. It's protecting her baby. These things happen every day in labor units. And let's say she actually stays. Let's say she actually gets admitted. These elements don't go away. Her subconscious still knows that this is not a truly safe place for her, in that it's unfamiliar, it's bright, there's lots of strangers. She can't labor when she's being watched functionally. She will never labor the way God truly designed her to labor in that situation. Problems that arise in the hospital very frequently arise because they're trying to make her body do something that it's saying, I don't need to do this right now. It's not safe. And yet they're forcing it to happen anyway. Far beyond what I can talk about in this one podcast. It's already going long. But just understand that God made a woman to labor when she feels that it is safe, when she feels like she is protected, when she is in a warm, quiet, private environment where she's not being watched, no one's talking to her, no one's making her do anything, no one's touching her and putting things on her that she doesn't want. This is how God designed her. And when we take her out of that and we put her into an unfamiliar environment, this process breaks down. What we're doing in this process at a hospital is causing damage. Most OBs, I need you to understand this too. When we start to think that hospitals are the safest place to be, I need you to understand that most obstetricians have never seen a truly normal, natural birth. and yet we call them experts. They are experts in something they've never seen. And I know they've never seen it because even if you manage to have an unmedicated birth in the hospital, it is not a natural birth. There's nothing natural about that process. So they are claiming to be experts in something they've never seen, they don't trust, and they don't understand. Home births are not reckless or careless when properly planned with the proper attendants for the right moms, which is most moms, honestly. The part of the brain that thinks and reasons, the part of the brain that you're using right now to think about the things that I'm telling you, that part of the brain must be turned off completely for labor to progress the way that God designed it to. Mom cannot be there thinking about answering questions or what's happening on a monitor or you name the amount of interruptions and questions and whatever else she has to deal with in a hospital. Those things all put her brain into a state that shuts off labor and completely alters the process that she needs to happen to give birth. These are basic things about the physiology of how God made us that we are fighting against when we go to a hospital. Now, there's a lot more to this. There's things like, what if something goes wrong? What about the mess? Is it safe to have your first baby at home? How do you pay for it? There's so much more that I just simply can't cover in this podcast. But the first thing I really needed you to think about and marinate on and really just to soak in is this concept of how God made women to give birth and how we are working against it. And that alone means that the hospital might not be the safest place. Now, you may notice that I didn't quote stats and research here, and that's because most of it is so heavily biased and poorly done that it's actually useless. If you want to find stats, they're out there, but just know that you can't just read the conclusions and walk away. You have to dig into the methods and the funding and who paid for it to get the full picture of whether the results are worth the paper they're printed on. Today, I wanted to appeal to your logical brain. Think about it. Do we really need a study to verify common sense? Do we need a study to show that God's way is best? So much of what we believe as Christians is based on faith, and we don't ask for studies to prove they are right because it's obvious they are. Furthermore, if you have a problem with your Ford truck, do you go to a Chevrolet manual to figure it out? Of course you don't. You go to the maker of the thing you're working on, right? Birth is no different. Women are designed by God, and His way is what we need to look to if we want to have success. When you think of how God made a woman and how God made a baby, it only makes sense that He would also make a process to bring that baby out of the woman. He's not going to just leave her without what she needs to complete the process. Birth has only been in the hospital for about 100 years. It was moved from home to hospital through a string of dark, dishonest things that were done by doctors to midwives. It was not moved to the hospital because that's the best place for it. It was not moved to the hospital because anyone had proven that that was safer. No, it was through lies and manipulation, and that's it. We know that hospitals are a place where sick people go, and nothing about that makes logical sense. Why would we take a healthy mom and baby into a place full of sickness and germs? Hospitals do stuff to a process that needs nothing done to it. Hospitals are motivated by money and policy, period. Their drive for your well-being is actually secondary to those two things because they need you to be healthy so you don't impact their bottom line negatively through litigation. And they have entire departments dedicated to making sure that you don't. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is each individual that works in a hospital. I was one of those people. I did not have these motivations. Neither do most of the nurses that you deal with. But the problem is they are a part of a system that is far bigger than them, that they really have no actual control over. And if they fall out of line, they will be quickly put back in line or they will be fired. So while they do seem caring, they are a part of a monster that they probably don't even fully understand themselves. And I say that because I didn't understand it when I was part of it. Okay, so we've gone through a lot here. It's a lot. It's heavy. I didn't even scratch the surface of all that I know that you want to know, Dad. It's just too much for one podcast episode. There's no way for me to get it all, but don't worry. I have a very special thing that I would like to share with you that I want to announce, because as I was thinking through this episode, thoughts and ideas were just flowing, and I realized this is a major thing that so many of you are struggling with. And so many of you are looking for the information and you're having to go here and there and everywhere, and everything is very segmented. Everything is very scattered. And so because of that, I have put together a course. And I know you're thinking, I don't want another course. I get all of that, right? But I also get that time is short. This baby's going to come quicker than you realize. And you need the information all in one place. So I've put together a course to help you not only prepare for your home birth, but also have your questions answered and to have all of your worries put to sleep, put to rest, so that you can know that you're making a good choice. Okay, so that you can know confidently that you're making a choice that's safe, and then also that you're fully prepared for it. Inside of this class, we're going to go through how to prepare your home, how to prepare for postpartum, how to prepare to take care of your baby, who to have at your birth, who to hire to attend your birth, how to pay for a home birth, what to do if you have to transfer, everything. And there's going to be a special section specifically addressing the concerns of dads in a deeper format. Again, I couldn't go completely in full depth because podcasts are just not that long. So I'm going to spend a lot of time really digging into the things that most men have hangups about, honestly, and for good reason. So this course is going to be full of all the information that you need to prepare for your home birth. Now, this is not the course for how to cope with the pain of birth or how to, decide what interventions you want or whatever else. That's my main course. I already have that available for you if you need that. This is going to be more so the preparation piece, both mentally and physically preparing your birth space for the main event and making sure that you're ready mentally, that you have the preparation and you know what to expect, and then also physically that you have the supplies that you need, how to manage the mess, what supplies you need to minimize the mess, how to manage water birth if you choose to have that, how to deal with the birth tub, how to fill it and drain it when you're inside of a house where plumbing usually isn't, because usually where you're filling up the birth tub is not necessarily in the bathroom right where the water is. So how to deal with all that without ruining your floor or whatever else, which I promise you, Dad's worried about. We're going to deal with all that stuff. It's going to be a 4-week course. It's going to be a live format. We're going to be face-to-face. So you'll have a chance to ask questions if you have them. It's going to be on Thursday evenings starting on July 11th. And if you can't attend live, that's okay. The replays will be available for you. There'll be a workbook. There's going to be everything that you need in it. Sign up is not quite open yet. I don't quite have that ready for you, but I want you to go ahead and get on the waiting list because this is going to be a course that'll fill up and the class size is limited. So go to go.yourbirthgodsway.com/homebirthprep right now and pre-register. When you pre-register, you're going to be the first to find out when signups are open, when registration is open, and you'll also get a special discount when that comes to you. So you're going to want to get on that wait list. You're going to want to make sure you're the first one to find out that it's open. Go ahead and go do that now. I'm going to put a link down in the show notes as well to make it easy. But if for some reason you can't find that, don't know how to do it, it's go.yourbirthgodsway.com/homebirthprep, all one word together. You're going to love it. You're going to learn so much. You're going to be completely ready to go. So go get signed up right now, and I'll see you back here on the podcast next week. Real quick, if today's episode blessed you in any way, would you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review? It'll take you less than a minute, but it's the best thank you you can give me. And it will help my show to reach more mamas just like you, so we can all find God's best for our families. I'll see you right back here in a few days.